ever wished you could talk to animals? You can. Welcome to Let's Talk to Animals. My name is Shannon. I'm an animal sensitive and intuitive with animal love languages. And this is Pearl Cuts. He's my 22-year-old feathery sidekick, and he never misses an episode. I will never forget my first experience talking with animals. To be honest, my very first thought, other than, oh my God, this is so amazing, was everyone can do this. It taps into the universal language of all species. It's our human birthright, and it's something that most of us have forgotten about, except at a deep gut intuitive level. This language dives much deeper than our minds and the spoken word into the realm of the senses, thinking, feeling, smelling, tasting, touching, and knowing. In fact, the universal language of all species shows up most clearly in our survival instincts. How do we find breakfast without becoming breakfast? We stay tuned into each moment exactly as it is happening, right? Right, Pearl? He wants to go see his precious little toy, his bathroom clock that his grandpa gave him. That's what you want, right? He's tuned into each moment. He's like, I'll let you know where I want to be. But that is not all that talking to animals is good for. We can also use it to tune into the animals in our own lives. And if you don't have a pet, you can use it to tune in, or even if you do, you can use it to tune into the wildlife in your backyard. I know a woman who once talked a wasp out of her house using animal communication. You can even connect with your houseplants, with the trees in your backyard, with your vegetable garden, and explore how you are connected with the sensory world all around you and the planet itself. Animal communication is always happening. But until we tune in, we won't know it or be able to participate. In this series, I talk with amazing people who've learned how to speak this universal language for themselves, and many are also teaching other people to use the universal language and to tune into their pets, their plants, other people, and the world. So my hope for this series, Let's Talk to Animals, is that you will be able to learn from my wonderful guests, discover new abilities that you didn't know you had, and begin talking to animals. Today's guest is Angelo Webb from Intuitive Touch Animal Care. We have had quite a time, mostly my fault, getting scheduled, and I'm so grateful to see your smiling face and to have you on our podcast and our video series. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It was worth the delay.
I'm so glad to hear that. And so I missed your sweet soul dog's birthday. You were telling me before that Miss Cheyenne got her steak dinner, and that was birthday. That was her thing. So originally we were supposed to record this series on her birthday. So
I think I actually had messed up anyway, because I tend to associate things in my head that I don't know, I make these weird connections. So I think it was supposed to be July 7th, but her birthday, her quote unquote birthday,
I remember that.
July 11th.
I remember that. Yep.
So in my head, I think 7s and 11s are like connected to me. So when we had it for 7/7, I'm like, oh, that's her birthday. And then I realized 7/11 is her birthday.
That gets into the whole realm of numerology and all these interesting things, right? That we're not even going to probably have time to cover. But exactly. There's so much going, and there's so much about these deeper levels of connections where it's like we don't always know, maybe we don't always have to know, but like I've always loved the number 2. It's my favorite number, and things always happen to me in 3s, and I could go down that rabbit hole and just stay there, you know. And so
that's a whole nother guest.
Right, pulling ourselves out and kind of going, okay, let's, what's the bigger goal? So because our listeners and our watchers today, our viewers, are interested in animal communication, we hope either that or YouTube just suggested this video to you and you have no idea why and you got sucked in. But we are going to talk about talking to animals. And the first question that I would love to ask you, Anne, is when did you first know that talking to animals was even a thing, that it was even possible?
Yeah. Okay. So when I realized it was a thing and it had a name, I was invited to go to a class in animal communication. My mother was actually going to it. She was invited by someone. Yeah, she has been a volunteer for like since I was 15 years old, and with the SPCA. So she met someone there, and that person was going, and it was with Amelia Kincaid, who's a, she's teaching for a while. She's like written a couple books. She gets into the physics of things too with an astronaut. So that's an interesting book she has. But when I said, well, what's that? And my mother said what it was just like, oh, I do that already. And it was just like, oh, I do that. Like, but it was just so interesting how it like I'd never thought about it. And when I began to think about it, and when I went to the class and she had us think about it, like, when did you because that's what you do as a teacher. Part of initially is trying to help people at the beginning is remember when you've done this before. Because I think you put it very well in your introduction, that we're all able to do it. It's just, kind of like gets buried, or we get closed off to it, whatever, society and all that. So I have been doing it since I was little, and I have recollections of it going back to my cat Dolly, probably also animals in the neighborhood. And I think maybe they were before Dolly, because dogs used to run wild.
They did. You're right.
Like neighborhood dogs.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
Yeah. Like we'd even bring them in our house. Like someone's dog.
They come in. Mm-hmm. We fed your dog lunch today. Hope you don't mind. I know my mom has lots of stories growing up in Massachusetts about everybody. I mean, they were kind of everyone's dog, right?
Yeah. They would just be wandering around, and you'd like play with them. You pretend they were yours. Bring them in, hang out with them. Mm-hmm. It was so weird. Like thinking back now, it's so different. I
know.
But so I think I have some recollection of that. But Dolly was my first pet, and she was a cat, and I remember it now with her, and I remembered it then with her. So that's kind of that's where it kicked off. Early adulthood, I would say,
that's so cool.
Like mid.
I mean, you're
mid 20s, late 20s, somewhere there.
That's really neat that your mom was intrigued as well. It's when I think back on all the years that I sat through, sometimes slept through my English classes, learning everything about the language that I was supposed to learn because I would need it to communicate with other beings of my species. There's this whole other language that I think the reason most people don't know that they can talk to animals, to and I should say other animals, because technically Homo sapiens, we're in the taxonomy too. We belong. We're not left out. And we just don't get any instruction. There are no classes. Nobody teaches us. Nobody explains to us why it's important versus, if you're an animal that's out in the greater food chain of life, if you stop speaking this language, if you get hung up in the memories of the past, or you start projecting into the future, you're going to be lunch. Like, somebody else is going to, and you won't see them. So it's like we stopped once we kind of opted out of the food chain of life, so to speak. This language no longer felt relevant enough to instruct. And so, but I just feel like there's this huge resurgence of interest. And I'm so excited about it and so happy, because I'm still relatively new in this journey and coming from a background as a professional freelance writer and author, and for that marketing and business. And then I'm like, oh my God, I finally found my people.
Yeah,
it's a really cool feeling. And I'm waking up.
Yeah,
I know, and you've had it for far longer than I have. I'm into my 5th decade, just barely, and I'm just now experiencing this, versus you found it in your 20s. And it's like, but it just feels like there are parts of me coming alive that I didn't know were there.
I think, I think that's the interesting thing about the journey of animal communication. And probably, animal communication falls into like the umbrella of energy work. I would say, and I think it happens, whatever you're into, it happened to me, because actually I had started with Reiki as I'm thinking about it, going back in time, that I was going to a Reiki group, and then I got invited to this class. And so, and they kind of say that, you know, you start coming to do this and you're going to see like the things are going to open up, you're going to be led to this and that, and your path will open and all this stuff. And in a sense, that's exactly what happened.
Exactly what happened.
So yeah, so I think it happens for anyone who goes on any sort of, you know, spiritual or energetic path. And I feel like I was going somewhere with that and I lost my train of thought, but it'll come back to me. I'm sure at some point.
I think it's wonderful. I didn't realize that you had started with Reiki. I actually was, speaking of the 20s, or my 20s at least, was Reiki trained to 1 and 2 and was attuned and didn't really understand exactly what I was supposed to do with it. And so I just kind of let it fall. Mm-hmm. But looking back now, you know, that's like 3 decades ago, I can see how it did turn something on in me, which is exactly, and I didn't even make that connection until you just said that just now.
Oh, wow.
And maybe it started me on this path because I know it definitely was like the first. And back then, especially growing up in Houston, Texas, deep South, you know, it felt like it's a little too woo, you know, to really talk about. So I kind of kept it close to the vest, but it was like, it was the first thing the gift I'd given myself to kind of start to explore a little bit beyond my mind. And there was something very expansive and kind of wild and exciting about that, which tells you I obviously, you know, didn't get out much when I was in my 20s, but it was like I was going on this inner like wild adventure instead of an outer wild adventure.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what happens for most people who start on any spiritual thing that they're going to really end up following, that you kind of do go into more of an inner journey.
It requires a different kind of brave.
Definitely.
Different kind of risk-taking behavior. So of course, the question on every listener and every viewer's mind is going to be, what is it like? What is it like to talk to animals? And of course, we all have our own experience. I would love to hear yours.
So for me, you know, I guess there's like a couple ways to talk about it. One is just like the sort of the tangible or the how we talk to animals.
Oh, that's a good point.
You know, and then there's like the what's it like? Like, how does it affect you? What's it feel like? What, you know?
What does it feel like? Yeah.
So to start with the I guess the what does it feel like? That's the fun one.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think it's a real thrill when you realize what you're doing and you begin to more so like apply it and do it more intentionally, to realize that you're doing it and what you can do with it, what the potential is of that, to be able to ask your pet something just cut and dry, you know, to just get an answer, you know, because you kind of think, even though I was doing it, I didn't, because I wasn't realizing I was doing it, I wasn't, the full potential of it wasn't in my awareness. Yeah. So when I realized what the full potential of it was extremely exciting. And it's sort of one of those like new toy things, and you're wanting the whole world to hear about it. And then, you know, similar to you, not everybody did want to hear about it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
for sure.
At the time I was working in a outpatient mental health clinic. I'm a clinical social worker too.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so some of the people there were very woo-woo, you know. It was definitely, we were talking about Westchester County, right north of New York City is where I worked in that job. Colorful. So, but there's an interesting thing where you think like that area might be more open to things. Maybe, I don't know, maybe-ish now. I'm in New Jersey, which is just like over the river from the Hudson River from New York. But at that time, it's a very intellectual, I would say. It's more like West Coast to me is where everyone would say to me, you belong in the West Coast, you belong in California, you should be in California. Like that's how I heard. If you belong in California, go to California. And you know, it's funny because I ended up marrying someone who came to New Jersey from California. But
that is interesting,
isn't it? Yeah.
You got your street, you got your woo credit.
Yeah,
through,
exactly right.
Through your other half.
Contractor, so that's kind of
awesome. Awesome. I love it.
Yeah, but so yeah, so I ran into that, you know, that kind of like shutdown. So I had to find my people.
Yeah,
I'm a Christian, really, so I've run into the shutdown there too. It's not like I could just go blabbing about this and have it received, you know, in my social circles everywhere. But you know, I think that, you know, being able to do it and not necessarily having everybody receive it so well. And I think back then, and it was a while ago, I don't necessarily want to say my age, but I'm a little
no
older
worries. You don't have to.
Think I am. So I'll say that. Sometimes I'm a little older than people think. So as time has gone on, I have seen more of an openness in people. But it was rough for a while. However, there were a few people who were sort of established, and those are the people that we learned from. And it was very exciting. And you finally meet your people. It wasn't the same with the internet. It wasn't as the connections weren't the same. The Facebook wasn't there. It wasn't, you know, all that. But it is exciting to learn to be able to do it. As time goes on, it can actually sometimes be, there's some parts of it that are hard because there's a responsibility to it. Yeah. There's sometimes an awareness on a certain level that can be tough, like with your pets. I think as your animals age, I think it can be hard sometimes. Sometimes there's like a little protective layer when you're not so in tune, where, you know, like, so being so tuned in can be sometimes rough. But, you know, I wouldn't give it up, but, and then as far as like the tools and all of that and how you do it and what it's like in that regard, you know, so it varies. It's interesting because lately I've had a number of instances where I'm getting more of a hearing, whereas I tend to historically be more of a feeling visual person, and feeling is extremely important. I think you can really miss stuff if you just hear, just see, or, you know, if you miss the feeling, you could miss important things coming from the animal. So I never completely feel like that's gone, but it's just interesting because I find it can change from animal to animal. And sometimes you'll literally feel it in your body, like you'll feel a hurt arm in your arm. You might feel a sensation in your arm, like a burn or something like that. You might smell their food. You might feel tired, listless, sick to your stomach, anything that they might be feeling if they're sick, or if they're feeling good, you might, you feel their energy. And again, like I was saying, you could hear words. It's not like sometimes people might think you're actually hearing a voice outside your head. It isn't like that. It's, to me, like, it's sort of like when you're, you know, how you think your words in your own head, or you're thinking about a conversation, but you can tell the difference. It sort of comes from outside of you, but the words are in your head. So it's different, and you get to know it too. That's part of the practice of animal communication, is determining the difference and making sure you can distinguish. And then there's definitely the visual, seeing images, seeing like videos almost in your mind with feelings attached to them. And I think I've got all the senses there. Hearing, smelling, tasting, my tasting.
Touching. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That can be interesting.
That can be interesting.
Yeah.
Not everything that animals think is tasty, we think is tasty,
Exactly.
right, Pearl?
Yeah, Pearl.
So well, I know. We have a really good thing. I've got a little thing of mini bananas, pearl-sized, cocktail-sized bananas here. He likes everything served with a side of crispy, crinkly plastic bag because save the planet, right? Yeah. So he likes the outsides of the banana. I like the insides. That's kind of a perfect match.
Oh,
but I love the way that, because they really put you on the spot asking you that question, and you broke it down so well as far as like the different facets of learning. Kind of even noticing what's happening to us is the first step. I mean, after a while, everything you just described, it also happens when we have conversations with our own species. I mean, but in most respects, it's, when we're conversing with other people, we're on the phone and we've got this verbal connection that makes it all feel so seamless. And so we just kind of assume that we're just trading words back and forth, and that's how it happens. And starting to tune in to that, I realized the other day I was writing a blog post about how why animal communication works, and what about it is similar to human. And it's kind of, the analogy I came up with is kind of like the 10% of communication that's verbal, and then that other 90%. When I was in my college speech classes and I had to stand up in front of people, and they talked about, how to hold your body and how to move your hands and why these things are important. It's like the animal communication piece almost feels like the other 90% to me. It's that sensory, it's all the other cues we look for. It's not what we call nonverbal, but it's not nonverbal. It's just, it's not filter necessarily we learn to communicate with such facility as we're studying animal communication that we don't necessarily have to filter everything through our mind in order to comprehend it on an intellectual level. It's like we smell something, if we want to process that and say to ourselves, I just smelled something, that's really for the purpose of the animal's person to communicate that. And that's what our words are good for. But really, I mean, it's the 90% that becomes the most important part. Yes. And it almost flips everything that we've learned about communication right on its head, and also starts to validate those hunches and those gut intuitions that we have that, tend to get downplayed, especially in a world that's so fast paced and so 24/7 and so all about, achievement and to-do lists. And it's like, wait a minute, if I just tune in a little bit more, maybe I can just not do so much, but more will get done.
Right. I think it is a real gift to do this, because I don't know that I would take the time that I do to quiet my mind and body if it weren't for animal communication. I'm not actually that kind of person. I'm kind of I can be kind of a thinker, into like a think. I actually just did a thing last night on the 5 element theory of traditional Chinese medicine, and your pet's element, but we all have these same things. People have them too, like water, wood, what type are you? And I tend to be water, which is more of like a thinker. And so I don't know that I would do it for myself, but I'll do it for my clients and I'll do it for my pets. So fine, if that's how I end up doing it, great. If I lower my own blood pressure, if I, restore my cells and all of that, so be it. If I'm doing it for someone else's good, the majority of the time, it's a blessing to me. It's a gift to me to get to do that. So it really is kind of a win-win type of the thing to do animal communication. I think everybody benefits, everybody wins.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just like went right into the next question, which is, how has talking to animals changed your life? And I mean, if there was kind of a holy grail of our work in the world, you just described it. you're doing something that benefits someone else, and you're also getting so much benefit.
Right.
As well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many, and you don't have to do this as a job, but how many jobs or how many things do you do in life that everyone feels so good about? Yeah. It really is a fantastic thing to do. I just love it, and I'm so grateful that it is something that came into my life. I feel very blessed to be able to do that. So, and to be able to give animals a voice is just a wonderful thing. I mean, how honored. I'm sure you feel the same way, honored to just give them a voice.
I do. And I've always been someone who I've talked on other podcast and video episodes in this series about, I was the person that hired animal communicators. I never ever in a million zillion years would have ever thought that I would end up becoming one, and yet it was kind of there all along. And I think that really speaks to an important point, which is that not everybody that learns these skills feels a calling to take it public, so to speak, like you and I mean, that's a calling in and of itself, and there shouldn't be any pressure to feel that, and there is so much pressure in this modern, fast-paced, uber connected world that we live in. It's like, well, if you're doing it, okay, and you're investing the time and the money and the, pain and suffering of opening up and growing, and, through some of those blocks that we have that, maybe things we don't even believe is possible, but it is, and we have to kind of push through that. You don't have to have a career goal. In fact, I've met people in my advanced classes who just signed up because they have an animal with a special need, or they want to just be more connected and feel more alive. And you don't have to have a reason other than just your curiosity is leading you there. There's something for you there. And you teach, right? And you have classes. Yeah, that kind of follows into the next question I had, which is, what advice, speaking of someone who might be listening or watching and might want to start this journey, is feeling intrigued, what advice do you have for them? Tell us a little bit about what you do and how someone could get started.
I definitely think it's worth checking out different, websites are a great place to start and sort of get a feel for the different the language, read through people's language, look at the photos, use your own gut intuition as to who you resonate with. So people could, someone could go to you or to me and get just as quality an experience, but for whatever reason, I'm a better fit or you're a better fit for that person.
Exactly.
So that's part of the advice. You might want to read some books like by, Penelope Smith. She was one of the originators of kind of getting animal communication out there in the world. I had the pleasure of doing a little bit of training under her. She's just been around for a very long time, and she has some great materials out there. So, take an intro class, take a mini one, watch these shows. If you'd like, I have a lot of free resources. They're both on my website and my YouTube channel. A lot of stuff I just cranked out, like a lot of my experiences and my stuff. It's free. You can go there and just watch and see if it's something that you want to begin to invest in.
And I will definitely post those resources in the show notes too.
Oh, thank you.
To make sure, I want to make sure everybody that resonates and wants to find you for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Of course.
And it's just a good way to get a feel for it and see if it's something you want to invest your money in. And then you might, and also see what people offer. Like I tend to now, not just because of COVID, but it definitely was a handy thing to be doing already. I do a lot of distance work. I do a lot of I do both private classes at a distance and I do group classes at a distance. So there's different styles. Some people like to just teach in person. So, look for that too. Know who you are. Are you somebody that you do better learning in person? Are you somebody that likes to just kind of be on their own and learn with somebody individually? Do you like to be with other people? That factors into. It's nice that there's so many options out there. And practice. If you really feel like this is something that you want to do, try to incorporate it into your life. It is something, it's a muscle that you do have to exercise it. I think it's not so good to let it just atrophy. If you don't use and build upon what you've learned and what you've learned about your own ability to do this, it can kind of fall by the wayside. And you're doing, unfortunately, you're probably doing yourself a disservice to do that. So we don't want to do that. And the animals in your life probably too. No pressure, but, just wanted to mention that, because it can be hard in this society to take time to pursue things that encourage you to be quiet.
It's true.
And to listen, but it really is worth it. So do it for a while and see how it helps, see the advantage of it, let it kind of unfold and trust the process of it. And don't give up on it just because, you don't get exactly what you were hoping to get. Is, the standard was I had to get exactly what this dog ate for breakfast and the exact color of it, the taste of it, what it ate out of, where it ate, who gave it to him, what time, don't let stuff like that be a barrier. It builds on itself. You grow. Even I had to hone this. I practiced it. Granted, I was picking things up on my own in order to do it for other people and to feel confident to be giving people information, and especially to be doing it professionally. I wanted to get that experience in a classroom setting. So I took classes at different levels, started at like intro, intermediate, advanced, that kind of thing. So just give yourself time to do that and write stuff down. Because there's stuff I look back on from when I started and I'm like, wow, I was really from the start getting stuff. I'm not trying to like toot my own horns.
Well,
it feels good to see that, it's like
this stuff works. I mean, it works,
exactly, right. And it proves that it's not necessarily so complicated too. It's like, it's just our intuition. It's our God-given intuition that we're just using it and focusing it.
Yeah. And just really, there's a big piece of it that, I mean, for me, as also it can get a little hung up sometimes in my mind. And there's
we all do.
Yeah, we all do. And everything about how our world is set up really encourages that. And so there's a big part of it that just says, and this is why I so resonate with my own teacher, Danielle McKinnon, is because she approaches it from, let's just play. Yeah. Let's just see what happens. Yeah. There's so much power in just being willing to allow our imagination to have a say, allow our senses to have a say, allow these other facets of ourselves to speak. And the intuition, gut instinct, I can't remember who said that. I know it wasn't, who has said this. I know it wasn't me because it's too cool. But intuition is what remains that nothing can talk you out of. Your mind can't reason you out of. Other people can't talk you out of. It's the thing that you know in spite of believing you can't possibly know it. It's the thing that you are going to do no matter what anybody. It's just that thing that won't go away.
Right.
And the best way I can describe animal communication is, on one level, it's the thing that you just know that you know that you know, and you can't, there's no way to mentally explain how it happens, because at its root, it's just like having a conversation with anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
You're having a conversation and you're just having this full on, I would call it virtual reality, but it's reality. You're having a conversation with another sentient living being. How cool is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I wish that there was a way to kind of, you just have to experience it for yourself.
Yeah.
And there is, and it's like, and there is, like you referenced it earlier, there can be a tough side to it, because some conversations, like we know with our own species, right, especially with our families, with our partners, we know that not all conversations are, sparkles and sunshine and champagne bubbles. Like there's some tough stuff when the first time I had to, it was my privilege, but it was like the first time I had to step up to the plate and realize that I was just about to have a conversation with an animal about whether it was their time to transition. And I have their sobbing person there, or about, there are some or things where, two animals in the home aren't getting along, or this can be heavy stuff. I mean, I loved what you said earlier, how like at first it's like this new toy and it's just like the coolest thing ever, and you just want to share it with everyone. And, I hope that will never fade on one level, because as someone who has, often felt like I don't really fit in, every time I find a place that I feel like I do fit, it feels like finding the toy again, all over again, and it's still sparkly and new. But there's also this really deep, and that's just, I love what you said about developing, just it's a muscle. You have to work it out. You have to develop it. I mean, when we first learned to speak our language, we had like 5 words, and probably one emotion. And then we grow and we learn and we transform, and we become better communicators, both giving and offering and talking, so to speak, communicating and receiving. And to that end, I will post the information for your website for people that want perhaps to check out your free resources, or sign up for one of your programs or classes, or book a session. So they can, because that was the first way I experienced animal communication, was I hired a communicator. What better way to experience it? Because then you get that gut knowing, because it's your animal, because they just totally described your animal, and you're like, oh my God, how do you know that? And it's like, because they just talked to your animal. And that's, a lot of people, that's their first experience of it, and that's awesome. That's totally valid. In fact, it makes perfect sense. But then I also want to let everyone who's listening or watching know we're going to have a follow-up to this, because we've run out of time for this episode, but you do a whole bunch of other things that I want to talk about, including essential oils for animals. You've mentioned Reiki. You have CBD, and it's like part of that conversation as it evolves does wrap in some of these different modalities that we become, because we can communicate with this animal that may have special needs. We can now start to explore what that animal would like to try, or what feels right. And there's a whole new world opens up beyond what Western veterinary medicine can offer. Sometimes it's a standalone. I do want to just make the caveat, animal communicator is not a veterinary diagnostician or a medical intuitive, unless they specifically hang out a shingle as such, although they can overlap. I have met veterinarians who've also studied animal communication, and there are some animal communicators that do specialize in medical intuitive. However, it's, if that's what you're looking for, just really pay attention to, as you mentioned earlier, Anne, what the specialization is on that person's website. But there's a lot more that we have to talk about, folks. So stay tuned. Anne will be back for part 2. And for now, I just, Angelo Webb, it is intuitivetouchanimalcare.com. My name is Shannon. And of course, you've met my precious one, my soulbird Pearl. You can find us at animallovelanguages.com. If you have questions after listening to today's episode or watching us on YouTube, you know how to find us. write to us with your questions if we didn't cover a question that you have. Me personally, if you have a guest that you'd like to hear from that you haven't seen on the series yet, or if you have questions for Anne, specific things you find on her website that you'd like her to talk more about, you just let me know and we'll make it happen for you, okay?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, yeah.
Anne, thank you so much for making it work, making it happen to be here today. It's been an absolute delight and honor.
So much fun.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, we'll do it again, and wish you and Miss Cheyenne and her sister a wonderful rest of the day, and look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you.
Bye for now.